What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine, along with Kobe Bryant Film Room and Big Dog Talk Sports. And for everyone who's tuning in, I hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, and help make this show the best that it can be. And you are already making this show the best that it can be, because now we have 798 subscribers and over 135,000 views. So we have exceeded our year-end goal, and I hope this support carries over into the new year 2024, which we have a couple days to go before we reach. And as always, we absolutely thank you for tuning in. Now, this is a continued series on the Los Angeles Lakers and what has been given up over the past 5 years or so. And when you really think about it, when you really like pull back the layers and really analyze the situation, you can't help, and there's no other choice but reach the conclusion that this franchise has mortgaged itself away. Because I often ask this question as things have evolved from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 to 2021, 2022, 2023. And as each season begins, I ask this question. I say, have we ever seen a franchise, not just in the NBA, but in all professional team sports leagues, which includes the National Football League, Major League Baseball, and the National Hockey League? I ask, have we ever seen a franchise mortgage its own players off the way the Los Angeles Lakers have been led to do? Either the response is one of pushback, or you get no answer at all. And sprinkled in between is the notion that, well, the Lakers, we only play for championships, or the young core was no good, or they was never going to win. But the sad reality is, because of what has transpired since they brought that guy to the team in the summer 2018, the sad part about it is we'll never know whether fans were behind the young core or whether they saw them as expendable. The way I look at it is an entire era of new Laker basketball was preempted. Like, whatever history that was going to play out, it has been preempted. And the franchise now lingers in a state of neutrality and a state of confusion, and is predictably unpredictable, but unpredictably predictable at the same time. And what I mean is, when you go this route, when you throw all your chips in, because that's what the Lakers have done since the summer 2018, they threw all their chips in the middle of the table. Well, at some point, you have to pay that bill. When you mortgage something out, sooner or later, you have to pay that bill to cover what you mortgaged off for whatever goal that you was trying to achieve in an immediate circumstance. And what happens is you wind up shortchanging yourself, and you sell yourself short in the process. Because if you're led to believe that you cannot succeed with the very players that you've drafted, that means for all practical purposes, you don't believe in your own efforts as an organization. When your history proves that not only can you succeed, but you can succeed time and time again. Since the ABA NBA merger leading into the 1976-1977 season. And since that merger, this franchise, prior to bringing that guy to this team in the summer 2018, won 10 championships. Essentially, 10 championships in a span of 30 years, which is one championship on average, one championship every 3 years. The Lakers have been the most successful sports franchise since 1980. More successful than the New York Yankees, more successful than like the San Francisco 49ers, Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, New England Patriots, Los Angeles Dodgers, Boston Red Sox. Then you can refer to the NHL, Detroit Red Wings, Colorado Avalanche, Edmonton Oilers, Montreal Canadiens. You see where I'm getting at? The Lakers have been the most successful franchise. And what they didn't realize is what they were sitting on was a springboard to generating a new era of Laker greatness. But it was going to be in a different method, but it would have been proven to be revolutionary. So when you bring this guy to the team who operates from a mercenary mindset, you are relinquishing the opportunity to succeed and roll for a decade plus. Now, you was convinced that his way was the right way, which led to a bubble championship. And see, that's the thing too. See, the people who support this, they want to have it both ways. Because due to unforeseen circumstances, due to a national pandemic with the COVID, which was outside of everyone's control, the 2019-2020 season had been suspended about 71 games into the season. And for all practical purposes, all professional sports was shut down, which was the appropriate thing. Remember, March Madness was about to start, and the NCAA saw that it was better to protect their student athletes from being exposed to a virus that could harm them or produce something of a worse outcome. And they lost billions of dollars that March Madness, the NCAA tournament, generates. And they canceled both the men's tournament and the women's tournament. Right? Now, the football season had just ended. Baseball season had not started yet. So both NFL and Major League Baseball was able to come up with a plan to work around the pandemic, right? And they came up with the best plan possible. Baseball, they started their season around like during July, something like that, and then football, always starts in September, right? But the NBA was the only professional sports league who decided to remove its suspension and come up with this idea of the bubble, right? And when you look back on it, when you say that the Lakers won the bubble, well, people will say, no, they won a championship. But the thing is, they won inside of a concept that was deemed the bubble. And everybody knows that it was not a standard playoff format. It was structured and introduced as a tournament when it started. They had a seeding round, remember? They had a seeding round before the so-called playoff started. It was structured as a tournament, right? So anybody who had won that, if it was the Lakers, Clippers, Milwaukee Bucks, and whomever, they would have won a tournament in the bubble. So you can't say that they just won a championship. No, you have to say they won it in the bubble. You can't have it both ways. It is what it is. But that's how you shortchange yourself. And that bubble generated a lot of negative circumstances that followed. It threw the NBA timeline off whack. Players were not used to competing and playing official basketball during the summer months. We saw a ton of injuries during the first, second week of the bubble, where players who suffer those injuries just recover from, and they're still not 100% all the way. Then you had a condensed period after the bubble ended where you had your draft, your free agency, and any trades that a team wanted to make was all condensed in a 2-week period. Then training camp lasted about a week. And then on average, teams they played 2 to 3 preseason games max. And then they came up with a condensed 72-game schedule. And you can clearly see when that season started that players were out of shape, and you knew that a rash of injuries was going to mount throughout the course of this season. And we saw one major injury after the next, and it happened to stars, all-stars, and superstars that impacted the season of the teams that they play on. And it took 2.5 years for the timeline to return back to its normal period. I'm talking about like off season, draft, free agency, or whatnot. Okay, so to me, the bubble was a detriment to the timeline, to the players, to the quality of play that we saw during the first half of that season following the bubble. That's just the reality of it. Okay. So since that bubble, where it looked like the Lakers was on top of the world, but if you look at it, as soon as they celebrated that thing, they already fell behind the rest of the league. And the reason being is that 29-20 Laker team was they already fielded the oldest roster in the NBA. When you bring on the likes of a Danny Green and a Rajon Rondo and the like, Dwight Howard, who was past his prime, he couldn't play full starters minutes. He couldn't play full starters minutes. Therefore, they had to change his entire roster by bringing in 8 different players, new players. And none of those players who they brought in, their following season, the 2020-21 campaign, It was Dennis Schroeder, Marc Gasol, Alfonso McKinney, Wes Matthews Jr., Montrezl Harrell, Ben McLemore, Andre Drummond. None of those players was on the team the following year. And the Lakers finished in 7th place. They had to advance through the newly formed play-in by beating Golden State by 3 points to advance when Golden State was playing without Klay Thompson, who was recovering from that Achilles injury that he suffered right after recovering from that ACL injury. Remember, Klay Thompson missed 2 whole years of basketball. And he lost to the Phoenix Suns in the first round. And therefore, and not only did they lose, but the last 2 games of that series, they got blown out by 30 points. And in the closeout game in the second quarter, they was losing 45-18 before Phoenix let up on the gas and the end score, kind of masqueraded the true nature of what was taking place. And the reason why they lost those 2 games the way they did is because they ran out of talent. They had no drafted players of their own on their roster outside of Taylor Horton Tucker, right? Who was entering his 2nd year. They had no drafted players. And as a result, now mind you, they tried that year, they tried to go semi-young, bringing in, like a Dennis Schroeder, but he was led to play out of position. And his play leveled off by the time the playoffs started. He was ineffective. Montrezl Harrell was played out of position to where by the time that series versus Phoenix took place, he was barely getting any playing time. Same thing with Andre Drummond. Okay. So therefore, this is where the transition between the youth-oriented teams and the win-now teams started to clash. So as early as 2021, you saw Phoenix and Utah claim the top 2 seeds of the West. And then you had Denver with Nikola Jokic, who was like the 3rd seed, 4th seed. And Nikola Jokic won his first league MVP, leading his team to a first-round upset of, I believe that was Portland Trailblazers, and led his team to the 2nd round without Jamal Murray and without, I believe, Michael Porter Jr. So you start to see the pendulum shift. And people thought it was a fluke, saying, oh, man, Lakers only lost because of injury to AD. Okay. I'm going to have to do a second part to this because I'm really trying to explain what's going on. Okay, so you ran out of talent, and therefore that guy that took over control of this all-time story franchise. And I remember when all this started, when you voiced your concern that, it would be a terrible move bringing this dude to the team long-term, considering the track record, in his previous stints with his home team on 2 occasions and down there in South Beach. Oh, man, he would never take control of the Lakers. We the Lakers. And I'm sitting there like, well, it's going to be easier because the Lakers had not been successful for a period of time, but it was for situations outside their control, and there was a desperation to win again, no matter what. Well, he knew that. So he's sitting here, man, he rubbing his hands like, man, I'm finna dig in here. I'm finna take control of this franchise. And he took control of it from day one. And you want to know why? Because the head coach, he was I'm talking about Luke Walton. He didn't stand a chance. He was gone within a year. And you want to know another reason why? Because every young core member outside of Kyle Kuzma was gone. Let go, traded off. And the only reason Kyle Kuzma lasted was because they was trying to trade him throughout the course of that bubble season, but he was still playing under his rookie contract, and they could not include his salary to match any deal for any superstar they was trying to bring in. Okay, so as a result, that guy came up with a plan to bring in all-time Hall of Famers, the big names, right? So you bring in Carmelo Anthony's, you bring back the Dwight Howards, you bring back a lot of the players who was on the bubble team, Rajon Rondo, Avery Bradley, to make the fans feel good, like, oh man, we got it in the bag. You bring in DeAndre Jordan. You bring in shooters. You bring in Wayne Ellington, who was playing for the Detroit Pistons. You bring back Trevor Ariza that's a ruse. That was a ruse, a retro move, because he was a member of the 2009 Lakers championship team. So you bring in all these veterans. Now, mind you, you bring in Kendrick Nunn from the Miami Heat. Now, mind you, they had to fill out 9 to 10 roster spots. And this is where you start seeing the trouble of relinquishing your real drafted talent. Because now you're so devoid of players that you have to rely on all outsiders to fill their roster. Not only that, but veterans way past their prime. And to do that, to achieve that goal of filling out their roster, you had to convince players to sign vet minimum deals for, like, on average, 1 year, maybe 2 years max. You get Kendrick Nunn to sign a mid-level for 2 years. So not only are you going, as I would like to call it, all veteran mode, but now you're going to field the oldest team in the history of professional basketball. The oldest team ever. And the so-called experts said that you had one guy talking about, well, that team was going to win 70 games. I say, yeah, they're going to win 70 games all right over the course of 2 seasons. That had disappointment and disaster written all over it. Now, mind you, the first 4 years with this guy on his team, the Lakers had the easiest first half schedule in the league, home heavy games against sub 500 teams. The first 4 years that guy was on the team. That 21-22 team started off, like, the first 16 games, they started off 500. And then the bottom dropped out. Because all them young teams that had been spending years, the previous 3-4 years, building around their young drafted players who were allowed to develop, they would run the Lakers off the court every time during the second half of them games. As long as they kept it within a 2-possession game by halftime, they knew they had it. And the Lakers couldn't keep up. They couldn't keep up. That includes that guy. That includes the guy who the Lakers mortgaged their future to trade for during the summer of 2019. And that team finished with a 33-49 record, which was 2 victories less than the young core, the real young core led team in 2018, who improved by 9 games. And that 22 Laker team had a point differential around -3, -4. Whereas the real young core driven team, who had improved from the previous year in 2017, they finished with a point differential of only -1, which is unheard of by a young driven team. So now you're so devoid of talent that you can't compete in the NBA, and you had 3 superstars. I forgot to mention, that was the same offseason where they acquired Russell Westbrook. So you had 3 franchise level superstars. You had 5 Hall of Famers, and that team generated and produced the most disappointing team in the history of the Laker franchise and in the history of the NBA. Because many experts had them going to the finals and winning it all. But if you read between the lines, if you understand what was going on throughout the NBA landscape, and you saw these young teams on the rise, you knew the handwriting on the wall and that their team didn't have a chance. Okay, so then the Lakers got an epiphany, the front office, and that offseason they start bringing in younger players, or they tried to. They brought back one of their own, Thomas Bryant. They brought in Lonnie Walker, who was, a reserve player from the San Antonio Spurs. They brought in Juan Toscano Anderson, who was released by the Golden State Warriors the previous season after Golden State had won the championship in 2022. And then they traded one of their own again, Taylor Horton Tucker and Stanley Johnson, to bring in Patrick Beverley, who was gone within 5-6 months. And he was traded to Orlando for Mo Bamba during the middle part of that 2022-2023 season. And he played like one half of basketball for this franchise. And we never saw him in a uniform again. And now he's playing for the Philadelphia 76ers as a backup to Joel Embiid. So that disappointment and that lack of talent from 2022, it carried over to that next year, which was last season, the beginning of last season, where they started off 0-5 and 2-10. But they pinned the blame on Westbrook. So therefore, by mid-season, when the Lakers was on the verge of missing the playoffs for the second straight season with this guy on the team, when you're in win now mode, they was about to crash again, and they got saved by the very element that they gave up 5 years ago. They got an infusion of young talent, and they caught the league off guard because the opposition did not have a chance to scout them, and they would advance through the play-in. And then they caught a Memphis Grizzlies team in the first round who was missing a starting center and a backup center due to injury. And then John Morant was dealing with situations, and then he suffered a wrist injury. That was not the real Memphis Grizzlies team that they faced, and they wound up beating them in six games in the first round. And then they played the Golden State Warriors, who played that small ball, who no longer had a big man after trading James Wiseman. So therefore, Anthony Davis just feasted in the paint, and that was the deciding factor. But it gave the impression that the Lakers had a great future, had this great young talent. But as soon as they matched up against a real team that was whole and complete, they lost in 4 straight games. So I'm giving a backdrop to carry over. And when I do this next video, I'm going to explain why they keep ending up with disappointment. Even after they got saved last year with an infusion of young talent. So that's a concession that the Laker brass realized after they finished 33-49 in 2022, that what they gave up is what they needed the most. See, they needed the young core, they needed the young talent even more so than the superstars on the team. See, so when fans or people tell you that that young core was not important, they have proven to be the most important and the hardest void to fill, because you relinquished all of them in record time to pursue a win-now scenario for the ages, where outside of that one season, you're not winning. Okay, so what I'm going to do, like I said, this is just a bridge to what I really want to talk about. And like I said, this is just the beginning. I'm going to break this down because this is deep. People don't realize what the Lakers gave up, and it's monumental. But I will continue this in my next video, and I hope everyone continue to, take time to see what I'm going to say.